I've always personally thought that teacher conferences were magical places. I remember the days when I got to go away from school for an entire day and get to go to the foreign language teachers conference in my state of Indiana. And I would come away energized. It was like this huge breath of fresh air that I didn't have otherwise. And I've also thought for the longest time that a lot of social media places where teachers get ideas are pretty magical places too, because I can log in and I can scroll and I can pick up new ideas that I can use right away. It's kind of like my pipeline for new ideas. Now with both of these, and this applies to lots of things too, but with both of these in particular, the conferences and the social media and all, there's this one side to it that I have really struggled with, and I know that there are lots of people who really struggle with it too. And maybe one of those people is you. And that is the feeling of overwhelm. You're totally overwhelmed and you start to feel stuck. And I've come across this so many times. I mean, I'd come back from one of those teacher conferences and I'd go, there are 17 things that I want to try, that I want to do. And I feel totally overwhelmed. Or I'll spend, 20 minutes on Twitter, or sometimes it doesn't even take 20 minutes to get overwhelmed for me on Twitter. And I'll go, oh man, there are all of these things that I could try. Or you start to get into a list of apps, or you start to consider all of the possibilities and you go, oh my goodness, there are so many of them. I can't even keep up with all of them. And the crazy thing is that there's going to be more tomorrow than there were today. And you start to feel that overwhelm. And for me, that has sort of paralyzed me in the past, because I would think, I'm totally stuck. There's 14 of these things and I don't even know, I don't have time to do 14 things. And how do I even know which one I want to use? And there's so much time involved in all of it. It's really easy to get overwhelmed. And I think it's definitely an issue, especially relating to technology, trying to figure out what to use and how much to use and all of that. I heard this one definition of overwhelm that was super, super helpful to me. And the definition goes something like this. It says that overwhelm isn't the problem of having too many options. It's not knowing where to start. That's the root of the problem with feeling overwhelmed, is that we don't know where to start. And so if you feel overwhelmed at any point, maybe watching these videos has you feel overwhelmed because you have all of these options and you just don't know where to start. So if the question there is, where do you start? Let me give you some ideas. One place that you might start is to start small. Start with something small. Start with something that makes you go, you know what? I can do that. And then you're able to accomplish that. And that gives you momentum to go on to the next thing. So maybe you start small. Maybe you start with impact. Start with impact. Start with something that could have a huge impact on your students if things get a little bit better there. Maybe if you can improve your teaching, maybe if your students can improve their skills, there's this roadblock that's keeping them from going forward. Impact is a good place to start. Or maybe you start with passion, something that you're excited about, something that your students are excited about. You can never go wrong with passion. That sometimes makes up for, the frustrations or the lack of energy that come with being overwhelmed. So start small, start with impact, start with passion, but just start. That's really the big key to overcoming overwhelm. Now, overwhelm, I have found, is just one roadblock that stands in the way of us doing what we envision, what we really want to do. And sometimes I'm afraid that the biggest roadblock that a lot of us in education have to overcome, it's not the technology. It's not always our leadership. It's not students. It's not parents. It's not any of those things. A lot of times, the biggest roadblock we have to overcome is ourselves. is that we have to, kind of work our way through these roadblocks, work through these doubts, work through, some of the things that we have going on in our head. Some of those other things are issues too, and time is definitely an issue too. But sometimes, if you're like me, I've gotten in my own way as much as anything. And so in my book, Tech Like a Pirate, I talk about some of the roadblocks that we have to fight through. And so I wanted to touch on a couple of those and kind of speak to some of the things that I've learned and read and heard and experienced myself so that maybe that could help you through some of your own roadblocks. So for instance, one of those roadblocks is the self-doubt. You start looking at some of the things that you'd like to do and you go, who am I to try that out? Who am I to attempt something like this when I don't have any experience? I've worked through that a lot. I dealt with that a lot in the classroom whenever I would try new things or I would experiment with something. And since then, now that my full-time gig is creating resources and empowering teachers, it's gotten 10 times worse. Because now I'm trying to encourage teachers to try things with their own students instead of just trying them with my own students. And so this issue has become huge for me still. A lot of people call it imposter syndrome. It's the feeling that you feel like you are trying to play a role that you're not, that you are kind of like faking it. Like one of my biggest fears when I was trying new things in the classroom is that everybody was going to figure out that I was just making this up as I went and that I was kind of faking it. And the reality is that there was a lot of that. That's just the idea of trying new things and seeing what works and learning from it. And one of the things to know that I've found when it comes to imposter syndrome is that we're all doing this. We're all trying to figure this out as we go, and that you don't need permission. And even if you're not exactly sure, you don't feel like perfectly qualified to do something, the truth is that we're all figuring this out as we go. And once we try it, we can learn from it. And if you learn from it and improve next time, you'll be better off the next time. That's really all that we can hope to do. Here's another one that I have thought myself and that I've heard a lot. I'm not techy enough. I've used a lot of technology in my class. I've done presentations on technology. I've written books that are about using technology in the classroom. I still a lot of times don't feel like I'm techy enough. So if that makes you feel any better, there's some real talk from me. And the truth with this one is that you don't need to know all of the technology tools. You don't have to know all of the features. You don't have to be on the cutting edge of technology. You don't have to be an expert at it. You just have to have what your students need and what you need. And as long as you can find that, then you're set. You don't have to know it all. But if you can find those handful of things that make things better for you and your students, that's honestly all the techiness that you need. And if you can just operate within that box right there, that's a good place to be. Let me throw another one out at you. There's one that I've felt a lot too that says, I've lost my momentum. I was doing great for a while, but then there's been a setback, something's happened, and I'm just like stuck now. And we were doing so good, and now what am I going to do to get going again? There's this concept from this book I read called Finish by John Acuff. And he talked about whenever you're making progress towards something and, let's say you're doing something for a certain number of consecutive days. And finally, eventually, at some point, because it's going to happen, you fail to do it. Maybe you were on like a 40-day streak and you don't do it the next day. Or maybe you get derailed from something. He said the most important day to consider if you're trying to reach a goal, if you're trying to finish, which is the title of his book, is not the first day. A lot of people say that the first day is the most important day. He says, It's the day after perfect. I thought this was brilliant. The day after perfect. The idea behind the day after perfect is that you've been perfect all the way up until this point. Even if it's not like perfect, but like you've gotten so far and you're making progress. And then all of a sudden there's a setback or there's a failure. The day after that is the most important day because that's the day that you have to figure out if you're going to continue on, that if you're going to be able to pick back up where you left off. And so if you experience that and you find yourself in the day after perfect, then remember how important that is and get right back on your horse. So as we continue to go forward, as we continue to get all of these ideas, it's also helpful to keep your momentum going, to have a roadmap, something that kind of gives you some directions to follow. And that's what we're going to be doing in these next several videos. We're going to be talking about a roadmap that I like to call the path to solid Techy lesson plans. This was actually a chapter in my book, Tech Like a Pirate, but it got cut out because my book was a little bit too long and something needed to go. And so I'm going to share that path with you in these next several videos to help you kind of wrap your brain around where technology fits within the lesson planning process. And so it'll be focused on these 5 steps: learn, engage, tech, craft, and enhance. We're going to dig into all of those in these coming videos.